Hello, this is Eye on Africa. I'm Yena Lee, and these are your headlines on the continent tonight. An independent probe finds that over 80 aid workers, a quarter of them employees of the WHO, have been involved in sex abuse in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And it's time to stop talking and start acting when it comes to climate change. The words of Ugandan activist Vanessa Nakate at the Youth for Climate Summit. France slashes the number of visas for Moroccans, Tunisians and Algerians ahead of the 2022 election. Morocco's foreign minister calls the decision unjustified. We start tonight's show with a damning report by an independent commission in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The probe found that more than 80 aid workers took part in sexual abuse and exploitation between 2018 and 2020. That was during an Ebola outbreak. A quarter of the accused were employees of the WHO. 29 women fell pregnant as a result of rape, and some of them were coerced into abortions. WHO's regional director, Matshidiso Moeti, said she was horrified and heartbroken. Here's what the international body's head had to say.
In my view, the failure of WHO employees to respond adequately to reports of sexual exploitation and abuse is as bad as the events themselves. We must have zero tolerance for sexual exploitation and abuse, and zero tolerance for inaction against it. I deeply regret that the suffering of victims may have been exacerbated by the apparent failings in the way the organization handled reports.
France 24's correspondent Clement Bonner has more on what the authors of that independent probe suggested to the WHO to avoid similar atrocities happening again.
Well, the report makes a number of recommendations to the World Health Organization to prevent these cases of sexual abuse and sexual exploitation from happening again. Now, these recommendations include offering better training to WHO staff, also improving internal reporting mechanisms, as well as providing assistance and protection to victims who all too often shy away from reporting the abuse that they suffer at the hands of WHO staff. The report also insists that from now on the World Health Organization should launch investigations as soon as suspicions arise, and that is not to look away when such accusations are made, as was apparently the case during the 10th Ebola epidemic from 2018 to 2020, according to this report. Now, you heard the World Health Organization Director General apologizing for what WHO staff did to those women. He also promised sanctions against alleged perpetrators, saying that all those who are no longer with the WHO will now be banned from future employment with the World Health Organization. He also said that 4 current employees will have their contracts terminated. Now, of course, he insisted that further investigations are underway to identify more potential perpetrators.
Next, some 400 climate change activists gathered for the 3-day Youth for Climate Summit in Italy. Ugandan activist Vanessa Nakate was present. She criticised world leaders for their empty words and lack of concrete action. She also underlined how climate change is disproportionately affecting the African continent. Take a listen to Vanessa Nakate speaking at that conference.
I live in Kampala, Uganda, a country that has one of the fastest changing climates in the world. In the past few years, I have seen more and more how the climate crisis is affecting the African continent, which is ironic given that Africa is the lowest emitter of CO2 emissions of all continents except for Antarctica. And yet Africans are already suffering some of the most brutal impacts fueled by the climate crisis. Rapidly intensifying hurricanes, devastating floods and withering droughts. Many Africans are losing their lives, while countless more have lost their livelihoods. The droughts and floods have left nothing behind for the people, nothing except for pain, agony, suffering, starvation, and death. It's time for our leaders to wake up. It's time for our leaders to stop talking and start acting. It's time to count the real costs, and it's time for the polluters to pay.
Staying on the topic of climate change, Zimbabwe has upped its emission targets ahead of the UN's Climate Change Summit in Glasgow this November. Better known for its political and economic crises, Zimbabwe is also grappling with the effects of climate change. The devastation caused by Cyclone Idai in 2019 is a stark example. Our reporter Ryan Truscott has the details.
Ahead of the COP26 conference in Glasgow, which President Emmerson Mnangagwa will attend in person, Zimbabwe has just pledged ambitious climate goals, including curbing carbon dioxide emissions to 44.7 million tonnes by 2030. Without taking action, those emissions are projected to reach more than 75 million tonnes. That ambition is laudable, but the big question remains, won't this be hard to balance against Zimbabwe's desire to become an upper middle income economy by 2030, which seems to require, so far, lots of carbon-heavy fuel? Zimbabwe is, after all, currently adding 2 new units to its coal-fired power station in Western Hwange, which looks very much as if it'll be largely dependent on dirty energy for years to come. And the country is registering thousands of new tobacco growers for the coming season. Most use wood fuel to cure their tobacco crops. Zimbabwe is used to the vagaries of climate. Yesterday, a report from Lopani in the arid west of the country said villagers there were blaming climate change for the drying up of a local wetland. They've had to resort to growing crops once a year instead of being able to grow them throughout the year. For a forex-strapped nation where poverty is increasing, the government appears to be recognizing the scale of the risk of climate change and the opportunity in forging alliances to face it on the global stage.
To Nigeria next, where police have dispersed a religious procession in the capital, Abuja. Participants were followers of a banned group called the Islamic Movement in Nigeria. An IMN representative says 8 people were killed at that rally on Tuesday, but police say there were no casualties and that they arrested dozens of people at the scene. The IMN group has been clashing with Nigerian forces for several years. Its leader is accused of terrorism and treason. From Lagos, France 24's Sam Olukoya has this.
Hundreds of Shias were holding a religious procession in the Nigerian capital, Abuja, when they were forcefully dispersed by security agents. The Shias say security agents shot dead 8 of their members, while many others were injured. Online videos and images said to have been taken from the scene of the incident showed bodies with injuries. This cannot be independently verified. The police denied killing anybody during the incident. A police statement accused the Shias of attacking security agents with petrol bombs. Nigerian security forces have in the past violently broken up gatherings of Shias. Many Shias are known to have been killed during this incident. Authorities rarely admit such killings. The worst incident occurred in 2015 when the military killed 350 Shiites at a gathering in the northern city of Zaria. The Shiites in Nigeria say they are facing persecution from the Sunnis, who constitute the bulk of Muslims in Nigeria. Sunni Muslims hold key posts in government and in the security agencies. Nigerian authorities appear to be uncomfortable with the Shias, especially with their leader, Ibrahim el-Zakzaki. El-Zakzaki draws a lot of spiritual inspiration from Iran. The government accuses the Shias and el-Zakzaki of holding extreme religious views. But some Nigerians say the government is too hard on the Shias.
Sudan's intelligence services say that 5 of their own were killed in a raid on a cell tied to the Islamic State group. 11 suspected terrorists from multiple nationalities were arrested. 4 people managed to escape. The raid took place in Khartoum's Jabra neighborhood. The manhunt is underway to find the remaining suspects. Next, Africa CDC's head, John Nkengasong, could very well be leaving the continent for Washington. Joe Biden has eyed him to coordinate the US's HIV/AIDS response. Nkengasong is a US citizen of Cameroonian heritage. The virologist had become a household name in international circles since the COVID crisis, as he emerged as a key figure in Africa's fight against the pandemic. A drastic but necessary decision, according to the French government's spokesman. Paris has decided to slash the number of visas for citizens from Algeria, Morocco and Tunisia. France accuses these countries of not taking back expelled migrants. Nicolas Germain takes a look at some of the reactions coming in from Morocco.
The surprising announcement was made by the French government spokesperson Gabriel Attal. France will reduce by half the number of visas it issues to Algerians and Moroccans, and by a third to Tunisians. Paris says these three nations are refusing to take back migrants expelled from France. Morocco called it an unjustified decision. In the streets of the capital Rabat, Moroccans were angry.
In Morocco, we think this decision is repressive. It prevents Moroccans from travelling. It goes against international conventions and agreements between nations.
Moroccan students are among the most concerned.
France must not forget that many students go to French universities every year, and there are Moroccan tourists too. It will be a big problem for these two categories.
The context is tense between Paris and the three North African countries. Recently, France accused Morocco of using the Pegasus software to spy on French officials. With Algeria, the relationship has been thorny ever since the bloody war that led to its independence. And in Tunisia, many are concerned by President Kais Saied seizing governing powers. The European Union has called on him to preserve the nation's democratic foundations.
That's it from the Eye on Africa team. More international news is up next with Monty Francis.
France 24 en español.
Pasa 24 horas
de difusión diaria.
24 horas para informarse
de toda la actualidad
de América Latina
y el mundo.
Todos los días desde el terreno
a través de nuestros noticieros
y programas hablamos
con los dirigentes del continente
y también de los que hacen la actualidad
política, económica,
artística y cultural
para ofrecerles una información
completa del mundo
que confronta
todos los puntos de vista.
Nuestras redacciones
en América Latina
y en Francia
trabajan en estrecha colaboración
para estar siempre presente
en todos los eventos importantes
y proponerles
una mirada diferente.
France 24 en español.
Ahora
todo el día.
Liberté, égalité, actualité.